All right, well, you know, it's not just airports. Fast food workers, Uber drivers joining in from coast to coast. Former Obama senior advisor Dan Kanninen says that these protests are well warranted. But labor policy expert Vincent Verduccio says hiking wages will actually backfire on the people protesting. Why do you think that's the case, Vincent?
Well, first, Jeff should have called Berlin Rosen because they're the SEIU PR arm that's helping organize a lot of these things. And what we've seen in the past, these so-called workers are actually represented by multi-million-dollar PR firms that are carrying the SEIU's water. This is happening across the country at airports, but especially at the fast food franchises like McDonald's, where SEIU is organizing these franchises, where a lot of times you're seeing it heavier on SEIU organizers and lighter on workers. And all of it isn't about $15 an hour. All of it's about getting more dues money for the SEIU. And they don't care what happens to these workers if automation or pricing them out of the market makes them lose their job. As long as it gets more money for SEIU, that's the bottom line for them.
Dan, SEIU, whatever your position on this, should have talked, just said something, explain their position.
Sorry, Neil, I couldn't quite hear you, but just to respond to Vincent's comments, I don't think this is the case of just the union doing what's good for the union. Obviously, the union is representing workers not just in Chicago, but in Atlanta and St. Louis and across the country. And the fundamental issue here is that we have an economy that has moved very well for people at the top. But even the president would admit that over the last 7 years, with month after month of job growth, folks at the bottom of the economy have not seen those gains. And we haven't had a raise in the minimum wage since 2009. The buying power is now 25% less than it was in 1968.
So, Dan, what would be the harm? What would be the harm then if this SEIU representative spoke to our Jeff Locke to explain just what you explained, whether you agree or disagree with that position?
Oh, sure. Look, I think a robust debate about this issue is important. Frankly, I think this is what we should be talking about today and not about some of the crazier things happening in the Trump transition that are distractions. This is an important issue. This election was decided, and I can say this as someone from the Clinton campaign who believes that we didn't do a good enough job talking to some of these voters about this kind of sincere economic issue in the middle of the country. It's a real problem.
A lot of them were blaming the present administration, but leaving that aside, Vincent, I'm wondering here what the fallout from this is, because you always hear it's one thing to push for a higher wage, another thing to push for what was effectively a doubling of it, and someone has to pay that bill. Now, the argument I hear from many on the left is people will gladly pay more for any one of these services, presumably even higher ticket prices at an airport to that. Would they?
Well, sure. I think they.
No, first I'll get to Vince, and I'll get to you, Dan.
Sure, go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, well, you're saying higher ticket prices for the passengers that they're going to have to pay. I'm thinking of the workers. You'll look at the SeaTac airport, the Seattle airport. That town raised the minimum wage to $15 an hour. Of course, there was a nice little exemption for if you're under contract, you don't have to pay $15 an hour. But we'll leave that aside. But guess what started happening? Employees started to lose benefits, such as free parking, such as free uniforms, because the company had to figure out how to keep the books balanced. So you're talking about ticket passengers having to pay more and them losing out. I'm talking about the workers themselves missing opportunity, having to be laid off, and also losing benefits, and they're the ones that are suffering worst of all.
So it makes them vulnerable. Dan, what do you think of that? With the best of intentions, what happens is the very folks protesting are the ones who could lose their job.
Sure, you can find a case of having to pay for a uniform that used to be free, but the result is overall, there's 600 economists that signed a letter to the Department of Labor and to members of Congress last year showing the overwhelming benefits economically of increasing wages for low-income workers. You do that, you raise the floor, you get more money in the economy, you get better job growth.
To doubling it or just raising it?
Well, that letter in particular was about going to $10.10 an hour. Okay. There are other economists who have said go to $12 an hour or $15 an hour. I think you can have a reasonable debate, Neil, about the number, but it's pretty clear these are legitimate economic concerns.
All right. Well, I'm glad you spoke out on that. I wish this SEIU representative would have done the same to our Jeff Locke, but it kind of hurts the cause when you don't, well, preach your cause. All right, a secret ballot vote ready to lead Democrats. Who do you think is going to lead that?